Hey everyone, it's Hannah. I wanted to quickly ask if you are enjoying the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. It goes a long way in getting the show in front of other listeners. If you listen on a platform that doesn't do reviews, please follow us on social media, like the show, or leave a comment. Thank you. We love you guys, and we hope you enjoy the show. You're listening to The Tales We Tell, a podcast about spooky stories, unsolved mysteries, and local lore. I'm your host, Hannah Parch.
And I'm Katy.
Welcome back!
I don't know if it's just like the different mics or something, or if you're using more of a normal voice than your like NPR voice.
Yeah.
Because normally you're like, you're listening to The Tales We Tell.
To the Tales We Tell.
Yeah, you did not do it that way.
Oh, wow. Part of it might have been yesterday we were in here messing with the new set of mics because I wanted to just like be sure before we sent them back.
Mm-hmm.
We actually did get them to work, but then we decided that the sound quality wasn't up to our standards. Like, I thought it sounded fine, and then Jarek played me back something from the Yeti, and I was like, yeah, you're right.
Never mind.
But to test it, I said the intro
100,000 times.
We just put it on a loop.
Oh.
So while Jarek was trying to adjust things to see if we could get it to like a good place, we just heard me going, "You're listening to The Tales We Tell," a podcast.
See, that sounded more like you normally do it.
I wonder what's wrong with me.
I don't know. I don't think anything's wrong with you. It's just you said it different.
It's true. I don't know.
I want to play it back for you now.
I can do it again.
No.
Well, we also have box wine that sounds like pee when we
Not
do
as
that,
bad as when you put the aerator in.
It's true.
I call it the whizzer.
We were at a friend's house last week for dinner, and she has an aerator, but it's the kind, it's like you hold it over the glass and then you pour. It was very confusing for me. But it also sounded silly, and I had a good laugh about it. I told her about it. I was like, when we do it on mic, it sounds like someone's peeing.
For sure.
And it's very funny.
Because we're 12-year-old boys.
Exactly. And we have mushy teenage girl brains. Different. Okay, I need you to see something and explain to me what it is. Because I think I had a ghost on my security camera last night. And I woke up Jarek to make him look at it.
Oh my goodness. Poor Jarek.
I know. Let's see. What time was it that I woke him up? Gotta find it. 1:33.
What were you doing awake at 1:30?
I could not sleep. You know.
Probably really couldn't sleep after this, then I'm sure.
Let me make sure I got the right one because I did 2 clips of it. To preface, so people know what Katie's looking at, it almost looks like a swarm of gnats, but then I saw gnats on the camera and they didn't move like that. So it's just like a bunch of particles, it looks like, that are just moving in a weird, like they're swooping in and around and swirling and swooping out.
Might just be pollen because it's been so windy.
Mm-hmm.
It is weird that it looks like they're going one direction and then another time they're going an opposite direction. Like they're going back and forth. That is more bug-like. So, I mean, it could be gnats. They're just further away from the camera than you've seen them previously. I don't know. I'd go with bug over ghost.
Okay. Well, it did trigger, like the reason we got it, or I even knew anything was happening, was because it triggered our camera, like which thought it was a car. Like it would say like motion detected vehicle. And so I jumped on there to look because it was 1:30 in the morning. And I saw that and I was like, what is that?
It is weird looking.
I know.
I will give you that.
Maybe I'll see if I can post it on our Instagram or something.
Yeah.
Let people take a look.
I intentionally don't look at Walker's
baby cam?
Yeah, the baby monitor, as often as I can. Because I was watching the other night when he's doing his sleep regression thing. And at this point now, I'm like, is it a sleep regression? Because he's skipped all the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
So why now? But also, why not now?
Right.
And I'm thinking, well, maybe it's less that and more he was overtired.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, because when they're overtired, it's harder to get them to go to sleep. Anyway, I mean, it's kind of like you've probably been like, I'm so tired I can't sleep.
That was probably me last night.
But I have been looking at it more lately because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And every now and then I see like a little thing just kind of like zoom around.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, I know it's like a dust particle.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, you know, that night vision setting makes everything look weird.
I know. And I'm one of those people, too, that, like, I don't want to say I don't believe in orbs, but I feel like I'm very skeptical, especially because most videos, I think, are just dust or bugs or something.
Yeah.
But then that's, like, the main thing that I see when I'm looking at, like, you know, like, if I think I see something creepy or paranormal, I'm like, that was an orb. Like, those things, I'm like, I don't know, a weird ghost.
Hundreds of little orbs.
Yeah, like a little ghost particle cloud. I don't know. Well, that was my one of two announcements. My second one is...
Your first announcement was ghost bugs?
Yes, was look at this and tell me if I have ghost bugs or not.
Are ghost bugs worse to have than real bugs?
I would say no, because I can't imagine that they would get on you.
I think they're less of a pest than regular live bugs, right?
Yeah. Oh, I did finally set up my pest control, by the way, with a company that Benny recommended.
Okay.
So, looking forward to it. Finally getting my house sprayed. But my next announcement is a shout out to Amanda, because she recommended this episode, or this topic, a couple weeks ago, and then I finally looked into it. So, thanks, Amanda. Oh, also, sorry, speaking of Amanda, she told me about apparently a museum I should have already known about, called, I forgot what it's called. It's like Eastern Alcatraz or something museum, but it's in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
And it's just like this big true crime
Feel like museum. I should know about it too. I've been to Pigeon Forge dozens of times.
I'm literally planning a trip so that I can go here. It's got, I know for sure it's got Ted Bundy's car. And I want to say it has John Dillinger's car.
Sheldon and I are talking about, so one of his vacations coming up, talking about going to East Tennessee to see family.
Mm-hmm. Might need to take a little detour.
Detour to Pigeon Forge?
Yeah. Well, I was looking at it, and I told Jarek, I was like, listen, if we start from my parents' house, it's only 5 hours. It's like, if we start from here, it's 7, but we'll just take a little trip up to Mom and Dad.
Well, that's why we go up to the cabin, stay the night, and then...
There you go. So, anyways, I'm excited for it. I'm very much looking forward to it. Okay. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Today I'm going to tell you about the Moon-Eyed People of Appalachia.
Sounds really familiar.
Well, you know Appalachia has
like, lots of weirdos.
Lots of weird stuff happening.
And I can say that because my whole family's from there.
Yes.
And we're moving to there eventually. So.
Also like to clarify for anyone who's mad right now, it is pronounced Appalachia, not Appalachia. And I will die on that hill.
I think it's kind of Caribbean. I think it's more of how does it fit in the context of the sentence.
Yeah. Okay, I will say it's not Appalachian Mountains. Or the Appalachian Trail.
I like the Appalachian because it's just kind of smoother, less like Appalachian.
I can't do it. Because, I mean, all I think of is like the school. I'm like, oh, Appalachian, the school. It's sounding weird now that I'm saying it more.
Yeah, that's one of those words that you cannot say too many times.
Yeah, but I also feel like it's like Beaufort and Beaufort, where it's like, there's a correct way to say it, and it's the way that we're saying it.
It's actually both. It's Beaufort, North Carolina, and Beaufort, South Carolina. Because when I was in South Carolina, I was like, oh, Beaufort. That's an interesting town. And everyone was like, no, it's pronounced Beaufort. And I was like, I don't know. Nope. 100%.
Yeah.
Like, someone was like, I grew up there. It is Beaufort.
Yeah.
But in North Carolina, it's Beaufort.
I don't know. But then I also recently learned from you that Beaufort is the correct French way to say it, or like,
yeah,
okay, because also that makes me think of Versailles, Kentucky. Is that where Versailles, Kentucky? And it's literally Versailles.
Yeah,
but they've just said nope, it's Versailles. That's what we call it, and it's
in Kentucky.
It's not that.
That's the Kentucky Fried Versailles.
I mean, I get that it's not the Versailles. Like, it's certainly no Versailles.
Well, kind of like Paris, Texas.
Yeah.
At least they pronounce it right.
At least they pronounce it right, exactly. Well, anyway, we're going to Appalachia. And our first stop is going to be at Fort Mountain, Georgia. I don't know really where it is.
I've never heard of that one.
Well, if you go there, there is an 850-foot stone wall along the mountain ridge. And by wall, I mean ruins of a wall, because it's thought to have been built between 400 and 500 CE. So, or BCE.
Okay.
And it varies in height from 2 feet to 6 feet. And again, it's ruins. Your first picture, I think, is of the wall. It was the best picture I could really find because it just kind of looks like a pile of rocks to me. But it's a wall, and it is 850 feet long.
Seems like less of a wall and more of a, like, fence.
Yeah, like it's not... Well, I guess if in the... Well, I was going to say in the places where it's 6 feet tall, maybe, but I don't know. But according to Cherokee legend, the wall is a remnant from an ancient war between the Muskogee people and a mysterious race of people known as the Moon-Eyed People. Another version says that that war that they're talking about was between the Cherokee and the Moon-Eyed People, but that's not really important. They were in a war. The Moon-Eyed People were involved in a war. So according to Cherokee legend, Moon-Eyed People are short or small. Some descriptions said bearded, like they all had beards. I don't know about the ladies. But they have very pale skin and very poor eyesight during the day, so they only come out at night, hence
the moon-eyed.
The term moon-eyed. And they also are said to have inhabited that land before the Cherokee, so they were there like when the Cherokee got there.
Short vampires.
Yes. And then after the war, the Moon-Eyed People began living underground or in caves.
That was my next thing but I went with vampires first for some reason.
Yeah. And
but then it made me think of the Beans.
The Beans?
The clan of Beans.
Oh, yes. Sorry, the Beans. The Bean
Those
clan.
Beans.
Those Beans, yes.
I'm referencing an episode,
It's in October sometime.
Yes, like 15 episodes back, 10 to 15 episodes back.
We talked about Shawnee Bean, I think was his name.
Yeah. Not to be confused with the actor Sean Bean.
Not to be confused with Sean Bean. Sorry. But what I'm picturing when I first heard of the Moon-Eyed People was, and this will come up later, the crawlers from The Descent. The creepy, I mean, like, they're less human, obviously. These are humans, I assume, that we're talking about. But, like,
yeah, until they move underground. Then they become mole people, and then they become less human.
Yeah, so, like...
I'm not saying that they're less than.
Yeah.
Just saying they're
slightly less human. But, like, kind of that same idea of they either live in the dark so much that their eyes can't stand the light of day, or they have become blind, like, I don't know, like fish that live in caves or whatever. I didn't look into the animals of caves.
Did you know that So the Louisiana state bird is the brown pelican.
Okay.
But
That's
all
hilarious.
pelicans in Louisiana are not Louisiana pelicans. They were actually Florida pelicans. I got transplanted over because all of the brown pelicans started eventually going blind and then dying and not being able to survive because diving in the water, it became the water just got too turbid with all of development and basically humans messed up the water, which messed up the pelicans' eyes. They all went blind. They all died. So, like, genetically speaking, all the pelicans in Louisiana are actually Florida brown pelicans.
That's sad.
Who apparently, I guess, just have better adapted eyesight for dealing with turbid water.
They're
I don't know.
The water down here has always been gross in Florida. We're used to it. Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know either.
That reminds me of a podcast I listened to. I cannot remember which one it is. I want to say it was You're Wrong About. But I learned that seagulls, a lot of seagulls are gay. But I think the conclusion was, specifically they're lesbians. And I think the conclusion was it actually was out of necessity because I think the question was like, are there gay animals?
Penguins.
Yeah.
Penguins are hella gay.
But there was like this colony of seagulls on this island, and they were just like, all these lady seagulls are mating with each other.
I saw an article that I didn't get a chance to actually click on and read, and also kind of didn't really want to read the whole story. The headline was enough.
Yeah.
But apparently, like researchers finally caught caught on video 2 humpback whales mating.
Ooh, okay.
Which is like, I guess, we don't know exactly how it's done.
Yeah.
And I guess we still don't because both whales were male.
Just caught some gay whale sex.
Gay whale sex.
Nice. I didn't realize I needed to put a content warning on this one.
We went off the rails fast.
I know. It's been a minute since we I guess we don't really do content warning or like age warnings unless it's really bad.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, if anyone's listening, this one is like PG. It's fine.
Tiny Tim.
Dante, welcome. Except for that part. Don't listen to the part about it. Don't listen to what we just said.
Mating is perfectly natural.
Yes, it is.
We're just talking about animals in the animal kingdom.
Yeah.
Doing animal things.
Speaking of, last I heard, Charlotte the stingray has not had her pups. I hope by the time this comes out, she has had them because I think she's overdue.
I was waiting for your update.
Yeah. I follow her on TikTok and I kind of assumed it would show up as something. Anyway, back to our Moon-Eyed people who are not amphibious. They're just living in
subterranean.
Caves. Subterranean, yes.
Yeah. Somehow we went from underground to underwater.
I think I was talking about blind fish.
And then I was thinking I brought us underwater.
Yes,
with the
we were talking about blind penguins. Yes, okay. It was a very natural evolution of the conversation.
Also very unnecessary.
I mean, I'm happy to know that humpback whale fact. I might look for the video after this.
You'll have to let me know how it is.
I will. I'll send it to you. Don't worry. Okay, so some of the stories do say that the Cherokee eradicated the Moon-Eyed people. Other stories say that they just drove them to live in caves and they're not really seen. So unclear.
I mean, by doing number 2, they might have done number 1.
Yeah, exactly.
They drove them to live underground, where they probably did not thrive and survive for very much longer.
Or certainly not as humans. Okay, so this story or this legend first started being documented by European settlers in the 18th century.
So our John Smith types?
Yes. Wasn't that earlier?
Yeah, I guess you're right.
It was like 16.
I'm so bad with dates. Like, I can remember the stories. Yeah. I can remember a lot of people.
I'm terrible at pinpointing. Like, once we get past probably 1920, like further back than that, I'm so bad at guessing like time period. Like, I just finished watching the second season of Bridgerton, and I realized at the very beginning of season 1 they tell you what year it is, and it's like 1817 or something, and I'm like, I feel like I would not have guessed that far back, but I guess I could have looked it up because there are like real historical figures in it. But I don't know, that date just shocked me because I was like, I was thinking probably late, like 1880s, because my only other point of reference, you know how my what are they called? I want to say place marker, but that's not right. Maybe just point of reference. So for 1917, that's my granddad. That's when he was born. Mm-hmm. And then the 1870s and 80s was when Vincent van Gogh was active. So I'm like, that's all I've got. Before that, I could not tell you what was happening.
Yeah, I can't.
Yeah.
Because also, you know, they'll say like, oh, it was, you know, 1810, or they'll talk about, you know, the 18s, and then in the same breath, like the 19th century.
Yes.
And I'm like, that throws me off so much. I have to think about that.
I always have to think. And you know how I remember it? Is when I was in, I don't know, like 4th grade maybe. Hold on, how old was I? It must have been 4th or 5th grade, because it would be either 1999 or 2000. We had to sing some song for something that talked about we are the children of the 21st century. And I have to think of that because I'm like, 21st means that we were going into the 2000s. Mm-hmm. And I think of that song every time.
I also think of Phil of the Future, because he's the 22nd century man.
Oh, I didn't know that. Is that?
I think I can still remember that theme song. I loved that show.
That was a good show.
I was obsessed with Keely.
Oh.
Like, major girl crush.
Okay.
I wanted to be her.
Yeah. If I'm remembering who she is, yes. She was like the...
I still love Alison Mashaka. She's the actress who... Oh. She and her younger sister...
They have a band, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I like a lot of their music.
Some things I learned on like Disney Channel behind the scenes segments. So great. Okay, so we're in the 18th century, and I'm going to give you a date that you don't have to remember. Just 18th century, 1782. So in 1782, Cherokee chief Akanastado. I'm going to go with that. Keep that one in, Jarek. He told Tennessee Governor John Sevier about the Moon-Eyed People.
Sevier?
Gosh. How do you know who the frickin' governor of Tennessee was in 1782?
There's a place called Sevierville.
Okay. I said that real confidently, too. I was like, John Sevier. Okay, was it Sevier? Sevier. Oh, my gosh. Not my day for pronunciations.
I mean, I think so, because again, I'm going off of the town Sevierville.
Right. Okay. So John Sevier, who's never going to come up again after this, except for once. Okay, so this Cherokee chief, tells John Sevier about the Moon-Eyed People. He says that it was a story that had been repeated to him by his ancestors, and so it was essentially an oral tradition or legend up until now, and he was just repeating what he had been told. He said that according to him, the Moon-Eyed People were white men that had crossed the Great Water and landed near the mouth of the Alabama River in Mobile. He said that they had built several of the mounds in the area, so those earth mounds that we talked about in the giant bones episode. And then also, I have a note here that says, this is what Sevier documented. It's unclear if this is what Chief Akanastado said, but it's documented that the wall at Fort Mountain had been built by white men, quote, as protection against the ancestors of the Cherokee. So they're referring now to the Moon-Eyed People just as white people or white men. And you know how white people really loved the idea of them being here before the indigenous people. Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, if you haven't listened to Giant Skeletons, you can go back and hear a quick little history on what we were teaching our children in the 1800s, which was that a race of white people were in America first, and that the indigenous people killed them, and therefore we were justified in then killing all of the indigenous peoples.
Well, history is written by the victors. So.
Correct, yes. Okay.
They won. They get to say whatever they want, fact or not.
So there is a story that kind of became popular among white, not necessarily settlers, but like Europeans at the time. And it's the story of Madoc ab Owain Gwynedd. This is a Welsh prince. I'm just going to call him Madoc or Madoc, whatever.
It probably, because it's Welsh, probably not.
Probably none of those.
Probably none of that was right.
Okay, cool. It's spelled Madoc.
Yeah.
Maybe Mattis.
I mean, you might be right.
Is it like Gaelic, where all of the, like, none of the sounds mean what they mean?
Maybe.
I was close.
Yeah. The rest of it, who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Not important.
Because Welsh is crazy.
Welsh is crazy. So, Prince Madoc left Wales in 1170 with his brother and, quote, a few followers. And this was allegedly because there was a civil war happening and they just wanted to get out of there. So they...
Wow, very princely of him.
I know, right? He was not the oldest. Like, he wasn't the heir to the throne. So they just get in a boat and sail across the ocean, and they landed somewhere in Mobile Bay, presumably, which is in or near Mobile, Alabama.
You would be correct.
So they decided to settle there in the area, and it was like such a great place that Madoc...
Was it Alabama?
Yeah, really? I'm like, famously, us whites did not do well over here. Like,
I had lots of, Louisiana history classes growing up, and got to hear all about the settlement and the suffering.
I was gonna say,
I mean, the same thing with like here in the Carolinas. It's because it's basic. I always joke that moving up here, I've traded one estuary for another.
Yeah,
because basically this is geologically and geomorphologically very same.
Yeah.
I mean, we are, at least above sea level here, or like at sea level.
Yeah.
As opposed to many feet below sea level in New Orleans. But
yeah,
the settling in the swamps with the mosquitoes and the diseases, and then the wet and the hot and the humid, like,
sounds terrible. Sounds like
very,
actually a
very rough conditions.
Sounds like actually a really bad place to settle.
Yeah.
But
there's a reason a lot of like early settlers like
moved inland.
Well, I was gonna say we're both like the super wealthy and the super poor / recently incarcerated, and were given the option of jail or
here.
The Americas.
Jail might have been better.
I don't know. I think maybe on par.
Yeah, probably. Well, the Welsh royalty did not agree with you. They thought, Mobile, Alabama, we love it here.
I mean, probably fresh, clean air, probably, compared to...
Yeah, probably. And, like, also I would think, if it was me, I'd be like, well, are my options to stay here or then to get back on that horrible boat for another 6 months and go back?
To a civil war? No,
yeah,
thanks.
I'll just stay here. Thank you. We'll make it work. But Madoc was like, this is so great. I need more people to know about it. So he gets back on the boat and goes back to Wales and recruited enough people to fill 10 ships.
Oh, wow.
I know. And they left Wales, and he and those 10 ships were never seen or heard from in Wales again. So that's the story. To bolster this story, some Welshmen...
Kind of a crappy ending.
I know. Well, but like, then this Cherokee chief is like, oh, these white people built this wall. And so now, which Wales is part of the United Kingdom, or it's part of the British situation over there. So the British were like, well, we like this story of one of our own coming over here in 1170 and settling. And Welshmen who were arriving in the Americas post that, they would even say that they found stone forts that were similar, quote, similar, or...
Wait, 1170?
1170 is when Madoc came over. According to this story.
When did Columbus sail the ocean blue?
1492.
Wasn't he the first one?
We'll get to it.
Okay. Like, I'm not questioning that my, whole life is a lie, but...
Well, so Welshmen who would come over later, they allegedly found stone forts, quote, like those their ancestors had built back in Wales. So they're coming over and they're like, that looks Welsh to me, this ancient structure. Mm-hmm. Also, allegedly, they found that some indigenous languages were similar to Welsh.
They're wackadoo and full of consonants.
Yeah, like, because it's unfamiliar. So in 1608, some settlers found the, I'm going to mess up this too, Monacan. It's a tribe, indigenous tribe.
I think the second way was
Monacan.
That sounds
good.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Well, they found their language so similar to Welsh that they were able to have a Welsh member of their party act as an interpreter for them.
They're very confident.
Yes. And then in the 1680s, a man named Reverend Morgan Jones claimed that he had been captured by the Doeg people. Again, I'm sorry if I'm messing that up. In South Carolina. So he was captured in 1666. It's the 1680s when he's reporting this. Mm-hmm. But he reported that they spoke Welsh. And he was, like, able to recognize it. So in the late 16th century, this theory was especially popular among the British because at that time, Spain was doing most of the settling and colonizing of the Americas. So this idea that the British had actually come over first made...
God, it's such a pissing match.
I know. They really liked it because it made Spain look like they were, like, late to the game. And it also, in their eyes...
France was up there, too, though.
Well, but they don't care about France. They just don't... They care about the Spanish.
What are you talking about? They're always fighting with the French.
I don't know. I just know
they're always fighting with everybody. They're trying their whole world domination thing.
Yeah.
Colonizing everything.
Everywhere. Mm-hmm.
And then picking fights with their neighbors.
True. All I know is that I read that the Spanish were their rivals. So maybe it's like...
maybe it's because that's all like the eastern seaboard stuff, and then the French had the Gulf.
Yeah. I was going to say, they're sounding a lot like, in my opinion, like UNC Chapel Hill, because I feel like they claim a lot of other schools as their rivals. But I also feel like sports commentators just like to pick any and all of our North Carolina schools because there's a million of them. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, Duke and NC State, big rival game. Or like Carolina and ECU are huge rivals. Wake Forest and NC State, a big rivalry game. And it's like, that's not correct, in my opinion. But go off, whatever. Say what you want.
Well, it's kind of like, saying, declaring someone your enemy and them being like, wait, who are you?
Who are you? What was it? This is the second time we've talked about that, where you said, like, did you reference the quote of, like, I don't even think, the Don Draper thing where he says, I don't even think of you. Mm-mm. I swear you said that, like, last episode or the one before.
If I did, it was unintentional, because I've only watched, like, one season of Mad Men.
All right. Well, someone said it, where some guy was telling Don Draper that he, hated him. Mm-hmm. And Don Draper said, like, I don't even think about you. Yeah. Like, who cares? Okay. So the British like the story because it makes it appear that they got there first and that they had a, quote, rightful claim to the Americas, which we're starting on, like, lies anyway. Like, we're basing everything on lies.
Yeah.
The popularity of this theory grew even more in the 18th and 19th centuries. In 1902, a man named James Mooney published Myths and Legends of the Cherokee, which included the story of the Moon-Eyed People. This story seemed to be proof that white Europeans had inhabited the Americas before the indigenous natives. It reinforced their ideas and assumptions that the indigenous natives were, quote, primitive. And it's that whole idea again of, like, they see, like, sophisticated structures or, like, civilizations, and they think there's no way that this person who is not white could have built that. It must be based in a white culture, right?
Yeah.
Like, very ancient aliens. Like, there's no way Egyptians could have built these pyramids. It must have been aliens.
But also, if there were, white people here, that long ago, they're still implying that these are the, like, Welsh settlers that basically vanished.
Yeah.
So they're still Welsh people who came here. They weren't originally here. Yeah. Whereas the other indigenous peoples that they interacted with were originally here. Hence why
we
call them original Americans.
Yeah.
They were here originally.
Well, I think in their story, and their telling of this, the Welsh were the very first people to get here. I don't know.
And then other indigenous people came in.
And according to the Moon-Eyed People legend, killed them. Like, it fits with them very... white people loved this.
Very convenient.
Yeah. They were like, some white people were here first. We called dibs. And then the indigenous people came in.
British white people.
Sorry, British white people, to clarify. The right kind, not the Spanish. And then these other people came in and killed them and took over. And so now we have a right to claim it again and kill these people who are not white.
Because they're the true...
interlopers.
What's
that word? Use that word?
No, the interloper kind of works. The real invaders. They're the real invaders, not
correct.
The white people.
Correct. The white people are just claiming what was originally theirs.
Mm-hmm. We're reclaiming it. We're taking it back.
Yes, reclaiming. That's a great way to look at it. They're looking at it
That's
as
the
reclaiming.
white way. I mean, the right way to look at it.
Yes. So they also believed that...
White people suck.
Let me tell you. I know. They also believed that indigenous peoples only existed in, like, small scattered groups, which I did not, this was not taught to me in school, public school system. So what the British settlers believed was that Native Americans were small groups. They were kind of scattered about, that they weren't a big civilization, or there weren't more than just, I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, you are. And, like, that is, I think that is the way it's taught a lot. I don't know if this is something that I've learned just kind of on my own or did learn in school or what, but, there were some tribes that were nomadic And there were some, like, I guess nations would be the way that had separate, what's the word I don't know how to describe it. It's like basically groups. It's like, oh, we're all, for example, we're all Cherokee, but we live in this colony over here, and they live over there, and then there's another group of Cherokee over there.
Yeah.
And, like, we're all Cherokee, and, like, we, travel back and forth sometimes, but separate groups.
Yes. Well, this is fun facts that I learned. In reality, as much as 90% of indigenous populations in North America had been killed by either European weapons or disease in the 16th and 17th centuries. So, like, by the time a lot of people are talking about this story in the 18th and 19th century, they're like, oh, there's not that many of them. And it's like,
because
there used to
them
be.
All.
Yeah.
Sorry, mass murdered them.
Yeah, committed genocide.
Also, mentioning that guy that got captured.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime I hear a story and they're like, oh, they were captured by the Native Americans, I'm like, you know what? If me and my mindset, and, like, who I am and whatnot, was alive then and I got captured, I would 100% be all for it.
Oh, yeah.
I would be like, heck yes. I'm gonna assimilate. Stockholm syndrome, here I come. Like,
Stockholm syndrome.
I want to learn all about your ways.
Well, they were so much, like, I was gonna say better prepared, but that's not correct. The settlers were so ill prepared and so unwilling to, I guess not necessarily unwilling to listen and learn, because they did some from these people who had, like, been thriving there for forever, but, like, they just could not look at them and say, oh, you're doing this the right way, let's do that. They were like, big city is good, we'll make that.
It's like taking some prissy person who only goes, outside to get from the house to the car to the spa, the mall, whatever. Taking that kind of a person, again, nothing wrong with being that type of person.
I'm like, I'm close to that.
I'm not attacking that person. Taking that kind of person and being like, all right, you're going to go backpacking in the mountains with all these other experienced hikers for, a month.
Right.
And them not really preparing in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And then just being out there and, like, complaining about everything and making it everyone else's problem.
Yes.
I mean, all the other people, all the experienced hikers would probably want to kill that person too.
Yeah, true.
So yeah, like, that's how I see the European settlers, as these just, like, not used to, like, more outdoorsy, primitive.
Yeah.
Like, they've come from a very well-established, they've got paved roads, or, well, versions of paved roads and buildings and infrastructure.
Yeah. And, like, weird rules about stuff. Like, weird societal rules to follow.
That still exist.
Don't make any sense.
Have you seen that, I think it's Vice video, of that guy who has gone through and broke, a whole bunch of different, like, just ancient laws? Like, you can't wear a collared, like a ruff or whatever, that's wider than a certain diameter. You can't shake out your rugs in the direction of Parliament. It's illegal to do something about, like, wandering the streets with a raw fish or a salmon or something.
Are these just laws that they never
took off the books? So they're technically still laws.
That's
and
hilarious.
He went around London breaking all of these laws. Oh, something about gambling in libraries.
Oh.
I remember that was a fun one.
I feel like that would be a real fun, whatever the British version of, like, Law and Order is. Because on Law and Order, a lot of times, like, if they have a suspect that they're pretty certain is their guy, but they don't have the evidence to hold him for, like, you know, the rapey crime, they'll get him for something minor. Like, there was a guy that he was about to leave the country, and they arrested him for jaywalking because they just needed a reason to hold him in custody for 24 hours or whatever. It would be amazing if there was a British version of that where they were like, and we saw you walking from the market with a fish that was raw, and that is against the law, so we have legal grounds to arrest you and hold you for 24 hours. Just like someone who's an expert on all of those, like, obscure... That's got to be a whole department there.
I'll see if I can find that video and send it to you, because it's really funny.
Yeah.
Because, like, he does a lot of these things, like, within eyesight of the police officer.
Sure the bobbies are there.
Yeah, watching. And, like, literally, like, talks to them while doing these things. And they're just, like, looking at him and laughing and, like, what is this guy doing being ridiculous?
Yeah.
Like... I think one of them was you can't wear a suit of armor into Parliament.
Oh, Lord.
And I think that was the only one he was turned away on, and that wasn't because it was against the law. It was just, like, against, like, security protocols or something.
Also probably a big distraction.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was, you know, couldn't wear the helmet because you couldn't have your, like, face covered. And then also can't go through metal detectors, so there's no telling what you're hiding in that suit of armor.
Yeah, that makes sense. That one makes sense. I'll give him that.
Yeah. I mean, you don't need to make it illegal. It's just against policy.
Yeah, just like maybe just for that one. Yeah. Okay, my last quick little fun fact about how we killed all the indigenous people. In 1200 BCE, the ancient city of Cahokia, which is near St. Louis, was, quote, twice the size of contemporary London. They left behind temple complexes, city structures, mounds, those earth mounds. And I think that when I say they left those behind, I think they just kind of moved on, because 1200 BCE is a long time before official white people got here.
Yeah. Long time.
But of course, European settlers saw all of these things and believed that they could have only been built by other white people. But, like, it's like, no, there were enormous populations of very sophisticated indigenous groups, cities, and either because of time or because you guys killed them, they're no longer there. So yes, by, like, the 1800s, they look very scattered. Because they are, but, like...
Well, there's also no telling what other kind of structures were there, but have just been lost to the ravages of time.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, then we started finding all those giant skeletons, and then that made so much sense that it was the giants who did it, so there's that.
White people were here first.
So I'm going to point out some problems with the Welsh prince explanation of things.
Oh, please do.
Okay.
I've got a few issues with it.
Okay. Well, the very first one is that there's no historical evidence to suggest that Madoc was a real person.
That was going to be my first question.
Yeah. There was a king, Owain Gwynedd, but there's no record of him having a son named Madoc. The timeline of the story... So, according to that story, Madoc got to the Americas in 1170.
How did they even know it was there?
I don't know.
I mean, were they trying to get to somewhere else and, you know, they were trying to get to China and hit America first?
I don't know. I mean, I get so confused thinking about, like, old cartographers because I'm like, how do you know if you're traveling in this one direction?
I mean, people were very much of the school of thought that the world was flat at this point.
Yes. So maybe they were just like, we hate the Civil War so much, we're just going to find the end of the world and ride off of it.
Sounds good.
And then they luckily found Mobile, Alabama instead.
And how do they know it was Mobile, Alabama?
I don't know. The whole story, I think, is not real, so...
I have so many problems.
Well, if you'll remember, the wall at Fort Mountain was built, what did I say? Between 400 and 500 BCE.
Yeah.
Which is before 1170.
Yeah.
So they
like
could
1,500 years.
Yeah, they could not have built that wall.
Nope.
Someone else had to have built it. Which is like in and of itself evidence that there was someone here before this fictional prince.
Yeah.
So suck on that. So the idea that indigenous languages were similar to Welsh, that turned out to be more like wishful thinking than fact.
There's a funny video or like there's lots of, I think I've seen a couple of like, what's something in your language that sounds like something else in another language?
Yes.
And there's one guy who puts together a sentence in, I think it's Swahili. And it's something, it's actually a nice sentiment or like banal or whatever, very just whatever. Like, I saw you yesterday. But when you put it all together, it sounds dirty. Yeah. So that is kind of essentially what was happening. There's this quote, which I didn't write down who said it, but it says, uneducated travelers were apt to regard every Indian language as gibberish, and so compared it with some known language, such as Welsh, Basque, Hebrew, Welsh is gibberish.
Correct. Or Finnish, that was also gibberish to them.
Yeah.
So they heard it and they were like, I feel like it would be like me hearing a language and being like, that kind of sounds like Russian to me.
Yeah.
Both of those things are so hard to understand. Yeah. I took 2.5 years of Russian and cannot pick out anything in a sentence unless you're saying hello, thank you, you're welcome, goodbye.
До свидания.
До свидания. Здравствуйте. Спасибо.
Спасибо.
Пожалуйста. Like, anything else you're saying, I could not identify any words. Or hearing something and saying, well, that kind of sounds like German because it kind of has the same, I don't know, like mouthfeel of German words. Yeah. And just being like, oh, it's similar to German, when in fact, it's not similar to German at all. So the vast majority of terms with similarities, like in the indigenous language similar to Welsh, usually they didn't make sense. So they were like kind of what you were saying. It means something in this indigenous language and it sounds like something else in Welsh. So, for example, in one indigenous language, the word for penguin was penguin, which I love.
Which is how
Benedict
Cumberbatch.
Yes, penguin. And in Welsh, the words penguin mean white head. And they were like, oh my gosh, they both mean the same thing, except for penguins famously have black heads, not white heads. So they just kind of overlooked that fact.
We had penguins in America?
I don't know. I don't know why they're just picking out the one example they gave me. I don't know where the penguins came from.
All right. I need to know. I need a history lesson on penguins now.
Oh, hey, there's a documentary that Benedict Cumberbatch narrates. You can watch that.
Attempts to narrate.
Oh, he's so adorable. So the only evidence of pre-Columbian contact in the Americas is by Vikings in the 10th and 11th centuries in Greenland, which I, for some reason, did not comprehend that was part of the Americas. I don't know why Greenland just seemed, I mean, it makes sense, but that is not North America. So like, it's certainly not Mobile, Alabama. No. And I think even the stories of that are kind of iffy.
That I would believe more.
Yeah.
Based on what I know about Vikings and whatnot. And yeah.
Yes.
Which is not much, but.
Yeah, same.
If any white people are going to come to America first, My money's on the Vikings.
It would make sense that it would be Vikings, and it would be like in the most northern barren land that you hit first.
Yeah, basically, I think didn't they like head out to explore and found Greenland, and they're like, oh, this is shitty. No one should live here. We should call it Greenland, make everyone think that it's awesome, and then this other place that is awesome, we're gonna call it Iceland, so that no one wants to come here. That was always like what I learned, and I have no idea how accurate it is.
Yeah.
I feel like that's one of those stories that they tell you in history class when you're a kid.
Yeah. That
aren't factual at all.
Yeah. I just remember hearing like, oh, Greenland is full of ice and Iceland is actually green. And then I found out as an adult, Iceland actually seems like a great place to live. I think I told you that. The weather sounds amazing for me. And also there's like no crime there at all. And they just seem like a wonderful people. So Iceland, here I come. JK. Okay. So there have been reports of back on white people in America. There have been reports of, quote, white Indians in the Americas since 1519, which was when Cortez was wherever he was, South America, I think. In 1681, a man named Lionel Wafer joined an expedition and spent several months in Panama among the Kuna tribe. And while he was there, he, in this article I read, like, took great pains to emphasize how good of a, like, recorder Lionel Wafer was. Like, he was just very, like, scientific in his observances of things. So
better than Mr. Ostman and his not so scientific description of female Sasquatch.
Yes. So among the Kuna tribe, Wafer described 0.3 to 0.5% of their population as being white. He emphasized that they were not ethnologically, or that they were ethnologically similar to other members of the tribe that had dark skin. They were just pale. Therefore, he said they were not a separate race of people, just the same race,
just
fair-skinned. He also recounts that the local lore of this tribe said that the paleness of these people was caused by their mothers, quote, gazing at the moon at the time of conception. I love this. This was such a wild ride doing this thing. So that was in 1681. Later reports, meaning 1708, 1724, and 1777, of the same region, so Panama, they ignored that observation and reported accounts of, quote, a white race of natives.
You know, that kid over there, that white kid, even though he looks like a carbon copy of his mother, who is not white, he's definitely still white.
Yes. And it's a whole different race of people.
Yeah.
In 1924, explorer R.O. Marsh, I hate when they don't give me first names, but Marsh, not to be confused with your Marsh.
Othniel.
Maybe Othniel was his middle name. Was it spelled with an O or no?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm going to call him Reginald Othniel Marsh. He returned from Panama with stories of a white race of indigenous natives. He said there were about 1,000 of them who, quote, lived in the mountains within 20 miles of the sea and completely segregated from their normally pigmented fellows. And he even brought back with him 3 of these, quote, white Indians.
Of course he did. Because we can just bring people places.
Yes. So if you would like to look, your second picture is Marsh. He also brought back, like, darker skinned indigenous people, but he brought back 3 children. I know. I mean, he gave them adult companions.
Who's this shady fucker over here with the hat?
He doesn't want his face to be Are you talking about the one who's...
Yeah, he's literally covering his face with the hat.
I feel like he was like, I don't want to be in this weird picture with
also,
you guys.
the way the hat is, like, shaped in the shadows, it looks like a creepy mask. It looks like the plague doctor mask.
Maybe he's a shadow person. Okay. What do you think when you look at this picture?
The dude with the hat.
Besides him. Don't look at him.
It looks like a dude and his wife, their 3 adopted children, and then standing behind them are their servants or, like, hired men.
Yeah. Well...
Also, I mean, I know the quote says albinism, but, like, you can see on the 2 boys more than the girl, like, 100%. They definitely look like they have albinism. Yes. Yeah.
I forgot that I gave you that caption.
Mm-hmm.
Well...
I've been thinking, you know, I'm like, okay, well, how much paler versus how much darker are we talking? Because depending on how pale they are, might be straight up just albino.
Yes, you're correct. They are essentially just describing people with albinism, because they would describe them as like, oh, like very white skin, very white hair, like sensitive to the sun, etc. And it's like, yes, you're describing someone who has a genetic condition called albinism. Like, we know what it is.
Genetic mutation.
Yes, thank you. So the Kuna people of the San Blas Islands in Panama.
Okay.
The Kuna people of Panama. I will preface this by saying a lot of this is based on an article from 1973, so the statistics might have changed since then. But the Kuna people once numbered around 700,000, but were largely decimated by Columbus and friends, you know. And they got down to about 10,000 from 700,000. That's insane. 2% of their population, as of 1973, are people with albinism. To give you an idea, the global average for albinism is 0.006%. And then this community has 2%.
Yeah, that's really high frequency.
It's, yeah.
Which, it's just interesting.
Yeah. Also, within the Kuna people with albinism are called moon children. And they're called this because they believe that one or both of the parents stared at the moon too long, either during conception or during pregnancy. I really kind of love the idea that it's during conception, because I'm just thinking of, like, just banging outside underneath that moon.
And just...
She doesn't
just kind of like laying there, just staring up at the moon while he does his thing, I guess.
She doesn't have anything better to do than stare at that moon. One of the main concerns regarding pregnancy within the tribe was in 1973 preventing a moon child. So when women were pregnant and they thought they either thought they might have a moon child for whatever reason, or they just wanted to ensure that they didn't, often they would be prescribed large quantities of charcoal to ingest.
To darken.
Which I meant to ask, I guess maybe I meant to ask Shelton, doesn't charcoal make you throw up, or am I thinking of something else?
That's something else. So, charcoal kind of like absorbs impurities or whatever.
Okay.
So when we went to India, you know, we got prescription for Cipro, we got some Imodium, and we got activated charcoal too. Like, we were prepared for deli belly.
Right.
And we didn't have any issues at all. Like, never had deli belly. And we ate some very questionable food. Or like when we did our camel safari out into the desert, you know, we stayed the night. And so, you know, we traveled out there, we went to the dunes, and we got to hang out on the dunes and watch the sunset while our guides, you know, took care of the camels, got the camels settled for the night, set up all our cots, cooked us some snacks, and then cooked us dinner.
Uh-huh.
This is the desert. There's no running water. They're not washing their hands after dealing with the camels and all the other things. And we're eating with our hands after riding the camels.
Yeah.
And did not get sick. Did not have any issues.
That's awesome.
But, you know, we brought there was, like, the first time we ate, like, any kind of questionable, like, somebody picked up some food with their hand and put it in our hands for us to eat. And, you know, it was one of those, like, you have to eat it because otherwise it's very rude.
Right.
After that, I was like, I'm going to take some activated charcoal just in case.
Just in case. That's smart. Well, you may have taken it during your pregnancy, although your child is very pale and blonde, so...
He's my perfect Aryan.
He's so cute, though. Okay. A quick note on albinism. It is a rare congenital condition characterized by partial or complete lack of pigment in skin, hair, and eyes.
They typically have violet eyes, and it's really cool.
Oh, I have a note about the eyes. Very quickly, it is a recessive trait, so this is kind of why it makes sense. Like, if you're in a smaller community, I think that if your mom had, like, it's easier to pass on that recessive gene when the population is smaller, I think. Their skin and eyes are sensitive to sun, obviously. So the fun fact I learned was that because their irises have no pigment, a lot of times you can see the retina through their iris, which is red, which is why some people with albinism, and oftentimes this is probably the explanation for animals too, why they might appear to have red eyes, is because they just don't have pigment in their iris, and you're just looking at the back of their eye.
It's kind of like how all, flash photography.
Yes.
With anyone with light eyes, you had red eye.
Yes, correct. They're also prone.
Had red eyes.
I did too. They're also prone to visual problems, such as photophobia, nystagmus, which is irregular rapid eye movement. Amblyopia, which is poor acuity in either one or both eyes, which can cause like a lazy eye. And then optic nerve hypoplasia, which is an underdeveloped optic nerve. And I think I read somewhere that like every person with albinism has some kind of eye problem. I would assume if you're considering like photophobia as an eye problem, then yes.
What's photophobia?
It just means your eyes are really sensitive to light.
Okay.
And that, I think, also has to do with the iris not having any pigment.
That's why, I'll be outside and I'm like, ooh, it's bright. I need my sunglasses. Meanwhile, Bianca's like, meh, because she's got really dark eyes.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of probably like just having your eyes dilated all the time, where just everything's really bright because so much light is getting in. And then obviously their skin is going to be sensitive to the sun because it's very pale. My skin is also very sensitive to the sun. Okay, so moon children, specifically of the Kuna tribe or Kuna people, so they're described as having skin more sensitive to the sun and also more susceptible to scratches and bug bites that like don't heal or become infected, which I didn't really see an explanation for that, but that's beside the point. But because of this sun sensitivity, they are like kept inside during most of the day when the sun is out and high.
Because sunscreen's not a thing yet.
Yes. And they're only allowed outside, or they only go outside when the sun is either gone or like low enough. So like,
or if it's like an overcast day or something.
So like, I feel like it's like, okay, you're coming in from the outside and you're just seeing these pale members of this society who only come out in the evening and at nighttime. And I'm like, okay, it makes sense when you look at it, when you think about it. But from the outside, just looking at that, you're like, okay. And they're called moon children. Because they're kept inside all day, the children specifically have a lot of like pent up energy because they're, not allowed to do stuff.
Because they're still children. They're normal people.
Yeah, they're just being put into very different
just
circumstances.
Sensitive to sunlight.
They have poor muscle development. And again, I'm talking specifically about descriptions of moon children. I'm not trying to say this about every person with albinism. This is just specific to this observation. They were described as, quote, finer boned and less robust looking. And because of this, they were excused from most of the manual labor, and instead they did sedentary activities like basket weaving.
Probably because A, you can do that indoors.
Yes.
B, if you're also indoors all the time, you're not out running around and moving and like developing physically.
Yes. It's like, yes, again, this all tracks. Like, they're being kept inside during the day. They're not being able to be as active as their peers. Yeah. Obviously, their bodies are going to be developing or looking differently because they're not doing this. They're not being given the same physical opportunities. During a 1963 study comparing 6 children with albinism to 6 children with darker skin, they found that the average weight in children with albinism was 10% less than that of the others.
Still tracks.
Again, average height was 3% less, whatever. And then all of them, I think, had myopia, which is nearsightedness. Which, again, if people with albinism all suffer from some kind of visual problem, that tracks.
Yep.
Within the Kuna tribe, the moon children were less likely to marry. Again, this is as of 1973. And, quote, widely rejected by those of the other sex. And I think that means it was not common for someone with albinism to marry someone who did not have albinism. Which, again, if your only options are to marry someone else with this same recessive gene trait, your children are
more likely to have the same genetic mutation.
Yes, exactly. There was a time when tribal law forbid people with albinism from marrying at all. However, overall, they are not rejected or segregated from the tribe. They're just, they're just like
oh, you're still a normal person. I just don't want to marry and reproduce with you.
Right. And, like, I think they are just kind of seen, like, especially the children, what I got was, like, they're still seen as, like, regular members of the tribe and society. They just have different needs and, like, requirements than these other children.
Actually, very forward thinking of them.
I know, for real. It's allegedly believed that moon children are more connected to the spirit world, and it's thought that they, quote, sin less than their darker skinned peers.
And sin less?
Yes.
It's because they're allowed to do less.
I know. Well, that's what I was like. Well, they're not given the opportunity to sin very much. Like, it's like you've got one kid that you keep inside all day, and their brother who gets to run wild, and you're like, it's so weird that your brother is, like, getting in trouble.
And meanwhile, Timmy's in here just weaving baskets all day, not getting into any trouble.
Yeah. So they did note that this statistic or this idea was possibly because of, they said, quote, low vitality. So, like, I guess if you're looking at, like, physically who would be capable of doing bad, I don't know.
You don't have to be strong to sin.
But I put lack of opportunity, I think.
Yeah.
Makes more sense.
Yeah. They're just looking to blame the albinism.
Yes.
For anything and everything.
Credit it with their... Yeah. There was a time when infanticide against babies with albinism was prevalent.
That's why I was saying it was, like, forward thinking of this tribe to, like, not segregate.
Yes.
And to, like, still treat them all as, like, normal other members.
Yeah.
Just, we don't want you to reproduce.
Yeah. Yes.
But I'm also not surprised that at one point infanticide was a thing.
In the 1950s or 60s, the chief at the time, whose name was Nelikanantule.
Sure.
he decreed that babies born with albinism or moon children should not be killed. He said you have to keep them because they are, quote, closer to God. So he was like, these are actually like very special, good
there we go.
children. Don't kill them. But
don't think I've ever agreed with a pro-lifer.
Yeah, that's a weird way of putting it.
I mean, it's basically what he is.
I know what it is. After his death, some of the infanticide continued, but I think it's kind of probably tapered off. Albinism is also prevalent among the Hopi tribe of Arizona, and it's very prevalent in Tanzania, weirdly enough.
Those are sunny places.
I know. So in the Hopi tribe, the prevalence was 0.5%, and then in Tanzania, it was 0.07%, which is still pretty high, again, compared to...
What's the global percent again?
0.006.
Okay. For some reason, I thought it was like 0.2.
No.
And I was like, okay, well, Arizona's still like above the global average.
Yeah.
But no, they're both above the global average.
Yeah. And to put it in different numbers, in the Hopi tribe, it was 1 in 200. And then in Tanzania, it was 1 in 1,429. Which, considering the size of Tanzania, like, that's a lot of... Because we're talking about the difference between a country and a tribe. So in some cultures, and I believe this was true of the Hopi tribe, men with albinism were at one point, like, revered, because of this idea that they were closer to God or more spiritual or whatever. But because of this, everyone wanted to get with
mate with them.
Get with them. So this allowed them to reproduce with several women, like more than just one woman.
And just upping the chances of...
And just spread that recessive gene around. Yep. Yes. So, unfortunately, there is still kind of a problem and a stigma in some African countries against people with albinism. This is actually, like, very upsetting. So, some of the superstitions that are believed, and again, I don't think I have to say this, but, like, obviously not everyone believes these. I'm not trying to perpetuate, like, a stereotype, but some people in some cultures, or some, whatever, here are some stereotypes that are not believed by everyone, but are believed by some people about people with albinism. One is that body parts of people with albinism contain magical or supernatural powers.
Yeah, you really did not need to use all those words to explain that these were just superstitions.
Well, it's funny, except that people with albinism are getting killed and dismembered because of that belief.
Okay, yeah, well, now
now you feel bad for laughing.
Yep.
Another one is that people with albinism are cursed or cause bad luck. This one's super upsetting. Content warning. Tiny Tim, Dante, close your ears. This is the belief that having sex with a woman with albinism can cure HIV or AIDS.
Oh, man.
Which you can imagine what that would cause.
That's just gonna,
like,
spread the HIV real bad.
Yeah, so, like, not only a lot of sexual assault, but also probably someone with HIV or AIDS sexually assaulting a woman with albinism and possibly passing that to her, which is just so fun. And then the last one I have listed is that sacrificing a person with albinism will, quote, appease the god of the mountain. And this is talking specifically about, like, a volcano. So when a volcanic eruption is at risk, some people might think that sacrificing someone with albinism will...
Why is human sacrifice still a thing?
I don't know.
Why was it ever a thing? Like, why do we need to sacrifice other humans?
We don't.
You're right, we don't.
We don't. In 2014, there was a report titled Reported Attacks on Persons with Albinism. They reported 129 murders and 181 other attacks within 23 African countries. There's a whole Wikipedia page on this. It's very upsetting. And thankfully there are like a lot of groups out there that are specifically aimed at protecting people with albinism, and like, because I think for a long time a lot of these crimes weren't really punished very well. So like there are a lot of places are either enacting laws or trying to
hold people accountable
and like get that number much lower, because it is 2024 and someone with albinism should not be living in fear for their life. Off of that horrible topic, the movie The Descent, which came out in 2005, first of all, set in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. Shout out. So the crawlers of that were specifically meant to be humans that never stopped living in caves. So like the director or the writer, whatever, he has said that he based those monsters or whatever on kind of the idea of like, well, what if humans never stopped living in caves and we lost our eyesight and developed supersonic hearing, but also lost a lot of our humanity and became like
creatures,
cave dwelling creatures,
genetically human, but ultimately not.
And like, I mean, nothing in anything that I read about that like specifically mentioned moon-eyed people or moon children or anything, but I put it in there because it sounds like, I mean, okay, in my opinion, moon-eyed people, or, you know, if that legend has any truth to it, were likely people with albinism who were sensitive to the sun, only came out at night, and, you know, this legend about them evolved. And I just feel like The Descent kind of takes that and villainizes it, and I don't know. So my conclusion, which I kind of just said, is that if it's possible, I think, in my opinion, that moon-eyed people existed and
still exist,
and were possibly just simply people with albinism that had either been segregated or chose to live on their own. And obviously if that happened, they're just going to continue producing more people with albinism, because that's how genetics works. So I mean,
that's, the gene pool is saturated with that recessive gene, so recessive or not,
exactly.
It's still upping the frequency.
Yes. I don't know why I said they almost definitely were not descendants of early Welsh explorers. I'm going to say they were not definitively descendants of early Welsh explorers.
Sorry, Wales.
Sorry.
I know you were kind of hoping for a claim to fame here, but no. I'm going to say no.
Yeah. The myth that Moon-Eyed people were Welsh is largely based in racist ideologies. This is my too long didn't read summary. And if the first explanation of Moon-Eyed people being people with albinism who were just isolated or segregated, if that's true, then technically it means that Moon-Eyed people still exist. And they're just...
So they have not been eradicated.
They have not been eradicated. Perhaps maybe that one...
colony of them.
Or perhaps they were killed.
That one gene pool.
Yes, but albinism is still a thing, and that is the story of the Moon-Eyed people.
It was a wild ride.
It was so wild.
We were here, there, and everywhere.
I know.
Lots of different directions.
When I started getting into it, I was like, man, we're going back into that weird fucked up American history that we did in, a couple episodes ago. And because like when I first read it, when Amanda sent me the article, it was just like there wasn't a lot. It was just kind of the little, like, the legend of them. And you know me, I like to find a legend and find truth in it.
Me too.
And and then like moon children came up, and I was like, oh, this cannot be a coincidence. And then I was like, now I gotta get on my soapbox about people with albinism and being persecuted. But anyways, that was Moon-Eyed People.
Well, awesome. I enjoyed that one.
Thanks. I don't want to call them a cryptid, but like a good, they're not a cryptid, they're humans. No. But a good local legend.
Yeah.
Local lore.
Well, also, I love, when I was in college, I was in the, environmental studies or the environmental science. There was a club.
Right.
And every summer we would do a big trip, and we went up to the Smokies one year. Mm-hmm. We stayed in Pigeon Forge. We rented a big cabin and stayed there and, explored all around. And on one of our hikes or drives or adventures, we stopped at an overlook, and I think it was somewhere on like the Blue Ridge. Mm-hmm. And we were reading the signpost about, this overlook or whatever, and they say like, oh, it was like Cherokee legend that, the great eagle landed here and flapped its wings, and that's what, flattened out the valley and made the mountains. Right. And we all got a big kick out of it because a lot of the group were the geology majors. Right. And so then later, I was doing a graduate level geology course, even though I was a fish person. Right. And I was like, no, I want to go spend 2 weeks in the Rockies. I want to learn. I want to see the Rockies because I've never seen them. Yeah. Want to learn all about the geology there. Like, I'm a fish person, but rocks are still cool. And so it was a 2-week field course, mm-hmm. but before, like, I think we spent like a week of, classroom time too. Mm-hmm. But each of us were assigned a different geologic feature that we were going to see. And so I got the Black Canyon of the Gunnison. Ooh. And I was searching for, a local Native American legend about the creation of this geologic form. Yeah. Could not find it. So I made one up. Oh. And so we each had to, research and then present on, mm-hmm. And then so like basically your paper report went into, we made our own field guide. Oh, so fun. As we drove around to all these different places, like you could read about it. Mm-hmm. And then, obviously while we were there, it's like, oh, Drew, you had, Yellowstone. Tell us more about this. Yeah.
That's so fun. I love that.
Yeah. It was great. It was an awesome time. I'm so glad I was able to do it. But, so we had to do like a PowerPoint presentation giving an overview, and that's how I started my presentation. I was like, well, and I found out I did look up and see which tribe, mm-hmm. lived in that area. Right. And I was like, according to, this people, this is the story. Right. And I was like, just kidding. I made that all up because I couldn't find one. Here's what geologists say. Right. And when we went there, I asked one of the rangers, the park rangers, was like, is there a Native American, like, creation story? Mm-hmm.
No, not for that one.
That person was not aware if there was one, so.
Oh, man. That's so fun. I love learning, obviously, I love learning about places and then going to them. Mm-hmm. Which is like
hence why we're planning our epic road trip.
Yep. I think Tennessee first, mm-hmm. and then Illinois, all over Illinois, and then just straight to San Francisco from there.
Sounds good.
And if there's somewhere in between, it's got to be up north because I'm not going. That'll be too much if we get up north and then have to go. We'll go diagonal to San Fran. But anyway,
well, if you want to see the pictures from this episode, you can check out our Facebook and Instagram. Search The Tales We Tell podcast. Sorry. It's been a long weekend. If you want to see pictures but don't do the social media, you should check out our website, thetaleswetellpodcast.com. And if you want to support us and get yourself some sweet, sweet swag, you should check out our Redbubble store. Just search The Tales We Tell. We've got multiple logos and you can put that on anything. And if you want to support us but you don't need the stuff except, I don't know, early access, commercial-free listening, sometimes some stickers or love notes, Christmas cards, those bonus episodes, all sorts of goodies. You can become a patron at patreon.com. Search The Tales We Tell.
Yep. And I've lost track of, because we're so ahead of schedule, meaning we're
This
one.
is great.
But I've lost track of when things come out, but I believe our 4-year episode is coming out soon.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the one after this. Yes?
Yes, because our next recording is the day after Critter's birthday.
Oof.
And that one will...
I just pulled the calendar and look.
Well, actually, this one might be our 4-year anniversary.
Uh-oh.
Or the next one.
Hold on, let me look at a calendar
Depending
real quick.
on...
Okay, so... well, our anniversary is on the 17th, which is a Sunday. So...
This will be the one...
This one will come out on the 13th. So... I'll have a cake for our next recording.
All right, sounds good. I'll bring bubbles.
Okay, and so everyone on the 17th, while you're celebrating St. Patrick's Day, you can also celebrate our 4-year anniversary. That's right. We still don't know what the we're doing. We're still fucking around with microphones.
4 years in, and
4 years.
I sound like a robot.
I was trying to explain it to someone, and I was like,
I mean, to my ears.
Yeah, I was like, at 4 years in, and I finally decided to try and improve us with new mics, and it's just everything up. But anyways, join us next week for cake, virtual cake. That we'll have, and
or go get your own cake and
that's what I would encourage.
Cake with us.
Go to your local grocery store, get one of those cream. I want to say chocolate cream, but that's not right. Anyways, go get a delicious cake from your local grocery store or a small business.
A bakery, or make it yourself,
or make your own. And just eat that while you're listening to us, because we will also be eating cake, and I can't promise that we'll do it all off mic.
Yeah, no, probably not gonna happen.
So, we'll see you guys then.
Bye-bye.